It is a star-studded episode of Book Break this month, as we are joined in the snug by J B Morrisson, Louise Miller and Tim Winton, and we're also hearing from David Baldacci, Tanya Byron and Emma Donoghue. And welcome back. I'm Alexandra Heminsley and this is Book Break. This month I'm joined by a perfect portfolio of 3 authors. We have one of Australia's most treasured writers and 2 homegrown talents who have both come to novel writing via the music industry. First up is Tim Winton, who has been writing for both children and adults for many years. With 25 books, countless nominations and 2 shortlistings for the Man Booker Prize under his belt, it's an honour to have him on the sofa with us. Welcome, Tim. And with iconic 90s band Carter USM, J B Morrisson had 14 top 40 singles and a #1 album. He played all over the world, headlined Glastonbury and was sued by the Rolling Stones. These days things are a little more sedate, and his third novel, The Extraordinary Life of Frank Derrick, aged 81, is just out. It's a joy to welcome you too, Jim.
Hello.
And this month Louise Miller is representing the ladies. Louise began her journalism career in music and film magazines, working for the likes of Kerrang, Smash Hits and The Enemy, and Empire. The Hidden Girl is her third novel, and we're thrilled to have her here. Hi. Also on this month's show, we have writer and psychologist Tanya Byron in conversation with Emma Donoghue, author of the best-selling Room and her latest Frog Music, where they will be discussing rooms, indeed writing rooms. And as his latest novel, The Target, hits the shelves, we get to hear from the worldwide best-selling author David Baldacci. Hi guys, welcome. Now then, Jim, you've had this huge previous career. Was it hard to give up the songwriting, the sort of clarity of...
No, well, I found I couldn't do both at the same time. I couldn't write. You know, if I was writing a book, I couldn't also write songs.
Yeah, so it was sort of long form or...
One or the other, because my songs were very sort of wordy. So I think I was using... I only had a certain amount of words available to me. I see. And Louise, you also came from kind of entertainment pop culture and sort of short form because it was journalism. Were you sort of doing that resentfully dreaming of being a novelist, or did you have a switch and feel like, no, I'm writing long form now too? Or?
No, I didn't really start as a journalist. I worked on music magazines, but I was a sub-editor, so I was working around a lot of people that were having a lot more fun than me, and they were going to interview people like Jim and travelling, and I working with them, I began to learn to write really by sub-editing their copy.
But that must be the best way, because you know what all the classic mistakes are.
That's
so you're...
Right. Yes, so I started to, when I went travelling across the States when I was 30, I started to want to write, and I stumbled upon Elvis Presley's guitar teacher who nobody had interviewed. And
it's quite a stumble.
And that was my first piece that I wrote for Mojo magazine when I came back.
Wow. And so once you'd sort of taught yourself or learnt on the ropes with writing, were you immediately thinking, novels next, please? Or was that
no,
a sort of
it took confidence? A long time. Yeah, it took about 10 years probably. And whilst I'd been in the States, I'd heard about a murder mystery, a historical one. And
these were fruitful trips.
And I stored it up, and eventually I tried to write a screenplay, and that was great because it was a whole story, A to Z, with the plot and characters, but no difficult descriptive writing. And that was the beginning of me trying to then move into fiction with my first novel. And
so it was like mysteries and thrillers found you rather than you having a thirst to write them.
I think so. I'd always loved mysteries. I'd grown up on Agatha Christie and Enid Blyton, and so I wanted to write a mystery, but I wanted to write more of a psychological mystery than an action crime thriller.
I see. And Tim, you wrote and published your first novel in 1981. So you were still at university.
Yeah, I'm a lifer. I mean, I'm doing the long haul sentence.
Did you choose this sentence? Were you kind of studying to be a writer when you were at university?
Yeah, I wanted to be a writer since I was 10. And I made the mistake of declaring it to everybody, and then I had to sort of live up to it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an interesting, strange way to make a living.
And you write,
as you said, when I was a student, I was publishing short stories and wrote 2.5 books as an undergraduate, and then got published young, 21, and wrote 10 books in my 20s, and just I was poor and desperate, and
the Stephen King approach to writing.
Married really young, had kids really young, had to feed them, and I was determined not to take the King's shilling and get a real job. So it's just that aversion to gainful employment that's kept me going for 35 years.
And do you you write adult books and children's books, are they inspired by being a dad, or is it a sort of palate cleanser? You know, we're talking about different forms of writing. Are you...
No,
or it's a story is a story.
I'm sure being a father helped, and I'm a grandfather now, but I think it was also just the need not to get stuck. I had 3 desks. Had a little wheelie chair. I think it was one of the great inventions, the chair with wheels. And when I got stuck, I just I couldn't afford to try and solve the problem because the meter was running and the rent wasn't being paid. So I just rolled down to the next desk and work on a kids thing or work on a short story. Or by the time I came back to the original problem, it had solved itself in my absence. I'm sort of path of the least resistance sort of guy.
And you're writing these sort of most ostensibly literary novels, but you're the one that's really kind of pragmatic work ethic.
Well, I'm a tradesman. I mean, I come from working class people. The only way I could justify myself or even understand myself was if I had a tradesman-like approach. So literary work, you work, at the high end, and then when it's finished, you get someone to sell the tripe out of it.
Amazing. Now, Jim, I must clear up. I'm all under control with the title of your book. I felt like I was saying it rather too slowly earlier. It is The Extraordinary Life rather than The Extraordinary Life.
Yeah. Although if you type it into Google, it will just keep
Does
saying,
it just auto?
Do you mean? No, I don't.
No, I'm fine. It's my title. I chose it. So could you explain that choice for us? I know because I've read the book and I was here and amending my auto cue first thing this morning, but for the rest of us, it is about a very ordinary life rather than...
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's an old... I don't know. I'd say old. It's an 81-year-old man who's living on his own, and it's just kind of bored. He's bored basically. He doesn't really. He's got no one to talk to apart from his cat. He never replies. And like cold callers and people trying to fix his roof. Yeah,
and the glass salesman.
Con him out of his money, and which he's got no money, and that's just, it's sort of living an ordinary, maybe dull life, and then he's run over.
He's run over by a milk float, and I feel I'm gonna kind of enthuse on your behalf here because you've made it sound like it's an overly ordinary book, but it's got the characteristic humour that fans of your music and your autobiography have. It's not. Yeah. And is that something that's conscious to you? Are you like, oh no, he's been run over by a milk float, I need to funny this up, or is that sort of your natural cadence?
I think I do naturally tend to. I will find myself putting jokes into things, which I don't want to do necessarily, but I just find it gets me to the end of it myself. So that's probably why it's funny. It's not. Well, I hope people tell me it's funny. Yeah. But then equally people say it's incredibly sad. I mean, I think one of the first people who read it told me. He said it was the most depressing book he'd ever read, and everybody else was saying this is hilarious. So
do you're kind of finding that you learn something about your readers and their state of mind when what they respond to, because there is tremendous sadness in it, but then it is also a witty guy talking to a cat who never answers. I mean, I really enjoyed some of their chats, one-sided as they were.
Yeah, although the cat says quite a lot with his non-moving face.
Just sort of stalking off every now and again. And why was the age thing important to you? Was it that you wanted to write about someone who had not much going on and that was a sort of seemed an easy option, or was it specifically ageing?
When I started, when I actually started writing, I was spending a lot of time with my mum, she was 80 at the time, and she was. There's a lot of that. She was living in a flat on her own in a village, and she had no. So that's her. Just that part of it. So because I was spending a lot of time with her, looking after her, that's sort of what made me want to write about somebody a bit like her. I mean, it's nothing like my mum. Yeah.
Because you tend to assume that all of marketing and all of the internet is just going for kind of teenagers to buy brightly coloured plastic things, and then you realise that there's this whole sort of other world of people watching TV and going online. Like, I love the scenes with him going to the library and checking up on his emails.
The idea that he should be even know how to use use email. Yeah,
it was kind of, there was a real loveliness to those scenes. And now, Louise, your setting is similarly able to be understood as bleak. We're in a very creepy house in Suffolk where a lot of things go and bump in the night. Was it a house that was inspired in reality? Did you kind of go on a country walk and see it and think, now that's going in a book? Or did you have a story you wanted to tell and need a backdrop?
Well, interestingly, I travelled, I drove quite a lot around rural parts of Suffolk looking for a house. I had an idea of setting it.
So you went literally house hunting?
Yes, I did. And it was that idea of moving out of the city and finding a house that, you know, seemed to offer sort of peace and quiet and an idyllic setting. But it's so remote in some parts of Suffolk that I actually did find the perfect house. And I was so pleased, and I sort of, you know, took a description of it. And then I went back to find it again, and I could never find it again. It was so difficult. And my sat-nav didn't work in the lanes, and I couldn't find my way around. There was no signpost. So I thought it was a perfect setting to for a story about a crime that's happening only 8 miles away from a town in Suffolk. But it might as well be 100 miles away because you can get so lost that the crime that has happened there is hidden and nobody knows it's going on.
And so you were looking for your house. Was that because you had your characters and your story, or because, you know, you were developing as a thriller writer and you wanted to do a creepy house story? Because I should clarify, you've got a couple who've moved there from London and they're hoping to adopt.
Yes.
And they're trying to create the perfect home to impress the woman from the adoption agency.
Well, it started off really about a book about principles, and I think, like lots of really busy working people, I find I have very little time in my normal day. I find I'm trying to squeeze 100 things in, and I became quite aware that I wasn't, in the way when I was younger I might go on a protest march or write a letter. I wasn't really doing it anymore. I might fire off an angry tweet about something, and I wanted to sort of explore that, and I wanted to send a woman who was a human rights worker into a situation where she had spoken up about injustice with people that were too scared to, but suddenly she came across a situation of injustice, but if she spoke about it, it threatened everything that she wanted. It would threaten the adoption, and I wanted to give her that dilemma. So I chose a place where it was believable that that story could happen, that a crime could exist hidden in plain sight, really.
Yes, because she's used to travelling across the world and making her powerful statements, and then coming home to her nice house in cosy sort of Zone 2 London, and then suddenly when there's someone that she can see from her bedroom window up to things, it's a little bit more awkward. And there's so much of the tension of the book comes from the psychology of the characters, because this character, she's perhaps untethering a little from the reality that she's used to and the actual reality. And did you research that? Because everyone has those flashes of madness when they're in the middle of nowhere and they can't get any phone reception, but she really sustains things.
Yeah, I mean, when I start a book, I suppose being a journalist, I always interview people. I don't really read books or documents for research. I tend to go to the experts and ask them. I put my character's dilemma to them and say what would happen. So in this case, I did interview people that had adopted, and there was a fairly common theme of people feeling they had to be perfect. They had to have, they were hiding an album that, you know, had a cover that they thought might not be appropriate for a book, and they felt they should be perfect and present themselves as a perfect family in a perfect family home. So
which is the instant way to put immeasurable pressure on someone's behaviour.
It is, and it's a very sort of anxious state to be in, but not one that other people always understand, which is, she's very isolated in this book.
We'll hear more from our guest shortly, but first it's the Writers' Room. This month we have two writers, bestsellers Tanya Byron and Emma Donoghue, discussing their writing regimes.
How do you fit your writing into your working life?
Well, I kind of crowbar it in, really. This particular book I've been thinking about for 12 years, but once I decided to write it, it took me about 3 months. So I didn't realise how much was already there, in a sense. But it's kind of how I write my columns. I think about them a lot, and then I can write them quite quickly. And because of the many different things I do, I have clinical work. I write for the Times, and I broadcast for BBC, and I also advise government. And I'm a mum. I tend to write sort of late at night, really. Sort of 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. works really well for me, and I can probably do 2 of those a week, and then I'll write over the weekend and stuff, and you know, and sometimes I'll just write on my phone. Thank God for technology. When I'm on the tube or in the back of a cab or something, it'll just come. And that's how I write. What about you?
Well, I think it does help to not be at all precious about needing your special pen. You know, that kind of superstition can really hold you back.
Oh,
I know. I'm happy to write on my laptop anywhere. When I'm at home, my day's usually structured by, you know, the kids being gone to school. I see them off on the school bus, and that really motivates me to get straight to my desk. But these days, I spend half my day on a treadmill desk because I was really aware the writing lifestyle was going to kill me. You know, I've been sitting down since I was about age 4, just sitting down, reading and writing. You know, and I kept saying to my kids, I'm going to live to be 100, and then I thought, that's just not true, is it? You know, so I got a treadmill desk, so I spend about half the day walking at 2.8 miles an hour and typing at the same time.
So you're like Victoria Beckham. She's got a treadmill desk.
I was doing it before her. Yeah, I've been at it for a year and a half. It's just a lifesaver.
So Victoria's so not the trend leader you are.
Well, I think we can all say that that's a little tape that's given us no pressure at all. I'm personally quite close to breakdown on seeing how hard both of those two are working. Guys, do you have regimes, treadmills that you write on?
No. I do write a lot when I'm swimming. But
with...
It's all... Well, I don't... Yeah, you know, obviously...
You've got an underwater tablet?
Funny.
Yeah, I just sort of...
You compose?
I think of things. I think of my best ideas when I'm swimming.
But is that infuriating? Do you then kind of come scampering out and have a soaking wet?
I'm counting lengths.
Yeah.
I do a certain amount. I don't go a lot. I'm not a great swimmer or anything. But I find myself thinking, right, I thought of 6 things, and then I'm remembering,
wow,
or whatever.
Things.
And
so
then
it becomes mathematical.
And then I think, what were those 6 things?
Oh.
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is, you know...
Both stimulating and infuriating, I imagine.
Yeah, but yes.
And
That's
Louise,
not how I write everything.
Yeah. Louise, how about you? Do you have little kind of routines that you have to stick to, or are you...
Yeah, I mean, I discovered about a year ago that if I switched off the internet, I could write the same amount in 3 hours with the internet off than I could with 8 hours with Twitter on. So that's my regime, and it is very sedentary, like Emma said. So I try and walk for an hour in the morning just to clear my head, and then I try to work for about 3 hours, 3.5 hours with the internet off, and then stop and not look at it again until the next day.
Tim, how about you? Do you limit your hours at your desks, or do you wait till the muse strikes, or do you work kind of office hours?
We need a union.
I know.
And so I try and work union hours. No, I start about 8 o'clock and work till about 1, and I'm not so troubled by Twitter or the internet.
And you live quite an offline life, so.
Which is I don't regret.
Yeah.
And I just work the best works in the morning, and then in the afternoon I play. So I want to be indoors and outdoors. I can't. This whole idea of enslaving myself to the gig, that just doesn't sound like any fun to me.
Well, exactly. Why be a writer if it's making you miserable?
If you're going to be self-employed, you might as well you might as well cut your own conditions. But you're at the mercy of your own ambitions, I guess, aren't you?
So Tim, the sense of place in your new novel, in all your novels, it's incredibly important. Your new novel, it's specific. It's really not even just landscape now. We're narrowed down to an actual tower block. Could you kind of talk us through how that came about? Again, whether it was the location and the characters, or whether they were a symbiotic relationship.
Well, I always start with the place before I have a story, or if I have a character. Yeah, it's just the way I've worked. I mean, it's a bit mystifying and it's not very efficient, but I usually start with a landscape, and then the logic of that landscape or cityscape or setting, provides the trajectory of the characters. The place determines what the story will be. And so I was writing my previous book, Breath, which is about kids surfing on the south coast of Western Australia in the 70s, but I happened to be doing that in a seedy tower block in the unglamorous end.
So that tower block exists?
Yeah, and I just the house was a bit crowded at the time, and I just needed even a bloke needs a room of his own.
Yeah.
Now and again. So I just would go out to work every day, and I would work in this little one-bedroom flat. And I guess the way that cheap buildings and vertical buildings force you into a kind of intimacy with people that you're not always up for.
So for you, it was,
you can hear everything. Whatever's going on. I mean, everything. You know.
And for you, it was an office you were visiting during the day. But for your character, his life is kind of disintegrated. He's a sort of middle-aged guy. He's divorced. He's unhappy. He's drinking too much. So for him, it's not sort of somewhere to get a little bit of peace away from the kids.
No, he wasn't there as a tourist. He's stuck. You know.
It's more of a sentence.
Yeah, and he's sort of he's hating on the world. He's sort of lost his. You know, he lost his high-powered gig as an environmental campaigner, as a big spokesman, and he said, you know, something that's perfectly true, but which is catastrophic to his prospects.
Yes,
the way anyone can basically, in any town, large or small, you'll eventually say something that'll mean you'll never work in that town again.
Yeah, picking up on Louise's novel there.
Yeah, so. Yeah, so he's basically fallen out of love with life, and he's stuck, and he sort of, despite himself, bumps into some people who happen to be his neighbours, and they're in trouble. And even though he's sort of at the bottom of the barrel for in terms of his own life, because he's middle class and had a little bit more mobility and education, he's in a better position than these people, and they need help from him. So this little boy is 6, and this pretty battered middle-aged woman who are his neighbours, they need a little bit of help, and the story's really about him being forced to put himself between them and trouble.
Yeah, and it is a sort of story of redemption on sort of many levels. And the thing that really struck me was this tower that he's in has an incredible view, and there's a sort of sense always that there's something out there, there's something a bit more, a bit other. And were you aware of that? I really felt, I'm so used to, because I've read a few of your books before, feeling like I'm in your landscapes, and in this one I was sort of peeking at it.
Well, it's weird. I mean, it's a funny thing that elevation does. It changes your outlook completely. You're looking down, you're seeing things in a totally different way, in that sort of bird's eye view. And people, you know, from high above, they look like creatures. They often don't even look like people, and you can often make objects of them, particularly if you're feeling as dyspeptic as my character. You know.
Yes.
But also, if you have a tall, cheap building with open walkways, you know, and particularly if you've got to put a kid up there, sooner or later you think, God, someone's going to go off this thing, someone's going to fall. Yeah. So there's that kind of tension all the way. Who's going to?
There's as much freedom as there is danger.
Yeah.
And another sort of theme of your novels is the sort of revisiting characters now and again. Do we do that here? If there are sort of long-term readers, are we? You
don't always notice them, but yeah, I'm a recycler. It's cheap, you know.
Yeah.
You just if you spend all that time and energy inventing
creating
someone, you know, and if you haven't killed them off at the end of the book, then, you know, it's nice to give them a run around the park now and again.
Yeah.
You put them on the pine for a while, let them sit on the bench between games, and give them a run now and again when you.
It's you and David Mitchell that do that. The beady-eyed, loyal readers get sort of, oh, hold on, kind of literary whiplash from seeing people.
Once, you know, they sort of step from one studio to the other.
Yeah.
I've always done that with kids' books and adult books. You know, the people step out of one world and into another.
Yeah,
and,
well, it's joyful.
Kind of
they're your worlds.
Yeah, you know, I'm stuck with them.
Now then, with books published in over 45 languages and in more than 80 countries, and with over 110 million copies in print, David Baldacci is one of the world's favourite storytellers. We caught up with him this month to put all manner of questions to him.
I first realized I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. I was a big reader as a kid, and I was the sort of kid that never shut up and just talked all the time. And my mom bought me a blank page book, a journal, one time, and she said, you know, why don't you write some of this stuff down? So I did. And I came back to her years later and I said, my God, what a gift you gave it to me. This was, you know, how I really started to write. She goes, well, that's really nice, son, but I really just wanted to shut you up. My inspiration is really what interests me. I don't write for my readers. I really don't know who they are. I write for myself. I know that sounds selfish, but really it's the best way to write, because if I'm really interested in the subject, I'm passionate about it, that's going to come through in the writing. With a character like Will Rugby from The Target, I'm fascinated with the guy. He's a hitman. His job is to kill people. So how can I make him interesting, complex, and something more than a machine? I love John Irving, and every book that he's written I've read and I've loved. I met him one time. I was so tongue-tied. He probably thought I was like either medicated or mentally deranged, because I couldn't even form a sentence. Finally, my wife took pity on him. He said, "John, David, John, he really loves you. He's got a man crush. Take it from there, guys. I'm out of here." It requires a lot of discipline, and it's a job where you can procrastinate as much as you want. And it's easy to sort of get distracted, because it's hard to be creative all the time. I'll go with David Ford, because that's my pseudonym in Italy, because I had to adopt a fake name in Italy because they told me Italians would not buy a book written by another Italian. My superpower would be to make everybody read more, not just for pleasure, because we have a serious literacy problem in the US, and our political situation is a mess, and we have a lot of very ignorant people. If you can't read and you can't think, you can't come up with your own opinions about stuff. We have a lot of people in the US who are willing and able to tell you what you should be thinking. So the world would be a lot better off if we all read a lot more. We'd be more tolerant, accepting of other people, come up with their own ideas and opinions. We'd be a lot more polite and a lot less violent about expressing our views too.
Well, David Baldacci there was a sort of rather inspiring superhero. Guys, if you were to, no pressure now that he's given this very kind of lovely answer, but if you were to be a superhero?
Well, until I heard his answer, I would have said Batman or Superman or somebody, but I don't know. I haven't really. That's too good, isn't it?
Yeah. He's sort of any other answer feels a bit sort of.
What would he didn't say what his name would be though? Did he?
Yeah, literacy man.
What's going to be on the? That's the important thing.
Louise, do you have a secret?
It's got to look good, isn't it?
A secret yearning favourite author that would be your superhero?
My superhero author would be Cormac McCarthy. That was somebody I discovered when I was driving across the States on my trip, where I found all the stories.
Yeah,
and I sort of drove through those places that he was writing about, and that was when my imagination really sparked, and I've remained loyal to him ever since. He's my favourite.
People should do Tim Winton driving tours.
I was going to say that. I was going through. If you'd asked me the same question, I would have said Cormac McCarthy.
Now, Tim, do you have a hero?
Oh, look, I think you know, worthy as that superhero conception was, I'm sticking with Wonder Woman. You know, it'd be nice to be that leggy. You know, it's all right for you.
She is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, kind of naff, but leggy. Give her that, you know.
And as far as dream authors go, do you have a kind of?
Well, I'm a big Cormac fan as well, but no, I'm a big fan of Brian Moore, the Irish writer. The critics were a bit sniffy about him because he was a literary novelist, but things happened in his novels which seems to upset critics. You can't have anything happening. And he was incredibly talented. He was almost like the heir of Graham Greene, who was his biggest fan. And he was a lovely man as well. He's since dead, but every time he published a book, I would go out and buy it the moment it came out.
Inspiring stuff. Thank you very much, guys. Now then, that's all we've got time for this month. My thanks to Jim, Louise and Tim for joining me. If you want to get in touch with the programme in the future, you can contact us on Twitter with any book-related questions. If you want to find out more about any of the books that Pan Macmillan publish, you can go to their website, which is panmacmillan.com. And if you want to watch any part of the show again, there's going to be an on-demand version available shortly. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel too. It's nearly summer holiday time and we'll be back soon with some scorching summer reads. Thank you for watching. Bye.